failure is about learning. Failure doesn't define you.
Eric, you're trying to get me in trouble on this podcast.
It can be hard to be yourself when you feel the pressure to fit in.
It's like it's with kids, it takes a village.
My identity was consumed by the thing that I was doing, not by my values.
As human beings, we don't do well in uncertainty.
You can't rush the update.
Even very small groups of people have the power to change the world.
There's always a moment when you're working on something like this where you don't really know what it's going to become. You have an idea, you have a reason for starting it, but you don't know what's going to come out of the conversations or how those conversations are going to connect. And if you've been listening from the beginning, or even if you've just dipped in and out of a few episodes, you'll probably have felt that there's been something consistent running through all of them. Not in an obvious way, not in a this is the theme of the episode kind of way, although sometimes that has been the case. But underneath it all, the same questions keep showing up. Questions about identity, about pressure, about what it means to belong somewhere or to realize that you don't. And what happens when the version of you that gets you here is no longer the one that can take you any further. And what's been interesting for me is that none of that was planned. These are people from completely different backgrounds, different industries, different life experiences, and yet they keep arriving at the same kinds of moments, the same kinds of turning points. And I think that's because those moments are universal. They're the points where something shifts, where you realize that something isn't quite right anymore, or that something needs to change, even if you don't fully understand what that change looks like yet. So, for this episode, I wanted to take a step back, not to summarize what's been said, but to connect it, to look at the bigger picture that's been forming across all of these conversations, and to reflect on what it might mean. And also, just to say thank you. Because if you spent time with this over the last few months, whether that's one episode or all of them, that means more than you probably realize. What I've done in this episode is pull together some of the moments that stayed with me. Not the highlights in the obvious sense, but the ones that felt like they were pointing to something deeper. The ones that, when you hear them next to each other, start to form a bigger picture. So this isn't about individual stories. It's about what sits underneath them and how those moments connect. So let's go.
I feel like people often conflate their identity with the thing that they're doing because it's an easy thing. It's a visual thing to assign value to, instead of realizing that that's just an expression of who you are.
There were moments where it was like, no one is going to show up for you like you show up for yourself. I'm here. I'm going to always be here. But if I'm not here, I need you to know how to do it for yourself. Go back to the mirror. Look again. I don't care if you can't see yourself because your eyes are too blurry from the tears. Get back there, wipe them off, and keep going. And then it started getting easier and easier.
I fell into a very bad depression that was terrible. And this is after one of the quote unquote most successful parts of my life. I had just finished my doctorate. And literally that summer was offered the professorship for Berkeley. And I moved to Boston. And it was just this reckoning of depression just hit me.
I feel very inspired by my queer friends who had to fight to be their authentic selves. Nobody handed that to them. It almost always required the death of a dream for them to come out as who they were. The death of the dream of what they thought life was supposed to be, who they were told they were supposed to be. All of that had to fall away and die. And they had to ultimately say, no, I'm going to be me, not who they're telling me I'm supposed to be. And even though as a straight person, I didn't have to go through that exact journey, I think we all have to die to that dream at some level in order to embrace that authenticity. And so I think surrounding myself with people who experience that death and resurrection, that is the spiritual paradigm, is death and resurrection.
What you start to realize quite quickly is that identity is rarely something we consciously choose. It's something we inherit from our environment, from our expectations, from the roles we step into. And for a while, that works. It gives you direction. It gives you something to hold on to. But eventually, there's a point where it stops fitting. And that's usually where things start to get uncomfortable.
I have clients all the time. I feel like I should be, or I should do, I should. And I'm like, just listen to the shoulds. It's a big indicator of feeling like you're not enough or you're not doing something right. Or what's the right way to, and then that takes us out of, and I'm absolutely lived this. I mean, I am not above any of the stuff that I help people with. I have to practice my tools every single day. But, recognizing those things of when we are judging ourselves and even others. And that's a strength in some ways of being able to, optimize things or change things in a way that works better.
I needed to separate money from music to heal my relationship with music.
I remember the identity was I was this entity, the singer of this band, and I had nothing else going for me other than that in my mind. And so when that was over, there was like a trough of despair of like, who am I? For sure.
It's probably one of the harder things to do in life, to completely abandon your identity that you've created for yourself, especially in an identity-based industry. There was a moment, though, when I came back from a tour where my checking account was really low for the first time. It's like a wake-up call. Up until that point, like I learned from my mother, I always had savings. So I never really lived paycheck to paycheck like a lot of my peers. But there was a moment where I had gone out on tour and was spending a lot more money than I was making. And I came home and it was like, oh, what the heck? It's not good. And what am I going to do? Felt vulnerable and scared and just kind of unworthy. Like I'm a world-class musician. Like, what's going on here? Don't really feel world-class right now, right? And so that was the moment where it was like, something has to change.
When that identity starts to crack, what comes with it is pressure. The pressure to maintain it, to live up to it, to prove that it still makes sense, even when something underneath is telling you that it doesn't. And that's where a lot of internal conflict sits, because on the outside, everything can still look like it's working. But internally, and I say this from personal experience, it can be a very different story.
So being the only or the other is 100% how I've been able to exist on this planet.
My mom had me at 14. My dad was 18. So just that in itself was a lot of adversity. So I grew up with a teenage mom. My dad was in and out my life. He was on the run a lot. So there was a lot of police officers that came inside of the neighborhood looking for him. I had to experience that.
So I was like wrestling with this tension of feeling like this expression of the faith is quite ugly, quite toxic. I mean, when you see the culture that it created, right? This fundamentalism, these beliefs led to this sort of narc culture where you couldn't even be your authentic self. I knew it was toxic, but I didn't want to lose Jesus. And it was also really scary to consider that I would potentially deconstruct some of that stuff because, again, when I first learned about Jesus and I learned about God when I was very young, I also learned about the consequences for not believing in God, for not believing in Jesus. And for me, to leave Jesus was to put my eternal soul in peril and to risk hell in the afterlife.
A large part of our experiences are formed by where we feel like we belong, or maybe more accurately, where we think we're supposed to belong. Because the people around us, the communities we're a part of, the belief systems we grow up in, all play a huge role in shaping how we see ourselves. And stepping away from that, even when you know it's not right anymore, isn't just a practical decision. It's emotional. It's psychological. Sometimes it's existential.
I would joke that our secret catchphrase was like, we'll figure it out, because people would be like, could you do this? And we're like, yeah, I think we could. Let's figure it out.
Everything that I am doing is fucking me up. I have to do something different. I have to make different choices. I will not be the reason for my own demise. I will never let that be the case. So what do I have to do in order to change this? This is my rock bottom. I can't get any lower than this. There's only up now from here. And it's up to me with every decision I make, day by day, minute by minute, to live in this idea of who I actually want to be, and then realize that in every choice and every decision.
I was always afraid that if I did drugs and died, my parents would kill me. I know that doesn't make any sense, but I was like, I was just like I didn't want to hang that way. So I survived it. I'm really street smart, and I think my kids will be okay too.
In the couple years after deconstructing and beginning to wrestle with it, stepping away from the church, and some of the deconstruction was happening below the surface while I was still a pastor, culminating with me stepping away, and then it escalated and more was going on. And I ended up going through a divorce. I got on anxiety medication. I mean, I was going through it. I really was feeling quite, like you said, untethered from my identity because as a pastor, that was very much a part of who I was. I was a pastor. I was a husband. I was a Christian. I'm in this church community, and we receive our identity very much through our web of relationships. And a lot of that was severed at the same time as well. And so that was pretty scary. And there were moments too where I wasn't sure if I would still continue to identify as a Christian or not, which was was scary to me. Like, if I'm not a Christian, then who am I?
I mean, it was just luck and good fortune and stepping up to the plate, basically. You know, the reality is, you know, opportunity is there. And you need a bit of self-belief. You need a bit of balls, basically, to say, you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen? You know, it doesn't work. So what? Are you worse off? So people overthink. They really overthink. But when the opportunity presents itself, well, you either take it or you do a U-turn and you know, go and hide under under a carpet somewhere. Did I have a lot of bumps in the road? Jesus, did I have bumps in the road? You know, these things happen. They test you. They're there to test you. So what do? Do you give in and panic? No. And I think those things carve you, you know. It's just experience. But your choice in the overall thing is you roll over and play dead, or you get up and you fight.
Reinvention isn't usually a clean process. It's not a neat decision where everything lines up and makes sense. It's messy, it's uncertain, and a lot of the time it comes from a place where there isn't really another option. You either stay where you are and accept it, or you step into something new without fully knowing what that looks like yet. And that moment, that decision, is where everything starts to shift. And once you've gone through that process, what starts to emerge is a different kind of question. Not who am I supposed to be, but what actually matters to me now? Because purpose isn't something that tends to show up at the beginning. It's something that starts to take shape after you've stripped away the things that weren't really yours to begin with.
I will say that I've been very grateful for my community that reminds me, no, you're closing the laptop this weekend and we're going to brunch, or we're going to pull you out of the house. You cannot be on your computer all day. And so I'm grateful for the emotional reminders. I think that we all go through seasons where one thing gets a little less attention while something else is your focus. And I just know that, you know, life is seasonal.
I just love finding new ways of looking at things and tapping into other people's perspectives. I get real joy from hearing somebody talk about something that I think I understand from a completely different vantage point and just blowing, you know, apart my assumptions around what that looks like. That feels like freedom. It feels like, and I think, you know, to get to that point of not having my value tied up in being the expert. So what I really am embracing is like that beginner's mindset.
Radical honesty starts with self. How does it make me feel? How am I portrayed? These actions or these feelings, is it going to help me in the next 5 minutes, 5 months, and 5 years? And then once I figure out all of those answers, then I give myself 5 days to sit with whatever those feelings and emotions are. And then if I do not feel the same way that I felt when I wrote them down, then I don't need to be honest in a way that we believe honesty to be sometimes with the other person. A lot of times we also feel like honesty or being honest with other people, we have to relay that to them. Sometimes we don't. We just need to unpack it and express it, right? Just deal with it yourself. But with honesty comes forgiveness. And I am a huge fan of radical forgiveness. And with forgiveness, you are forgiving yourself, you are forgiving the assailant or the culprit, and you are practicing an unwavering amount of empathy.
There's something about allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to open up like that like really bonds you to good people. And there are really good people out there. There's some really shitty people out there, but there are really good people out there.
I have a very, very clear recollection of being in the kitchen in that hotel with this guy with his face in front of my face, head to head, being verbally abusive, intimidating, and there was a carving knife right behind my back. And it's only a split second, and thank you, God or the universe, that stepped in that I didn't pick up that carving knife. Because why? I don't know. How? I don't know. But I didn't. And thank God I didn't, or our journey would have been very different.
What's really exciting is to not know, is to be in that totally creative space for a period of time, because you have to then get back in and do something and make stuff and so on. So yeah, that is definitely where I find meaning. I also find a lot of meaning and significance in working with people who are committed to learning and growing. And, you know, why I love talking to you and working with you is that regardless of all the challenges that, you know, you found yourself in, you had so much courage and determination to move past that situation and to do that. And that's like, what a gift to be let into that experience and to feel that, you know, as well. So that is just glorious.
So if you zoom out and look at all of this together, what starts to become clear is that none of these moments exist in isolation. Identity, pressure, belonging, reinvention, they're not separate stages. They overlap, they repeat, they build on each other. And for a lot of people, the turning points don't come from clarity. They come from discomfort, from things not working anymore, from something feeling off, even when everything on the surface looks like it should be fine. And what these conversations have shown over and over again is that these moments aren't the end of something. They're the start of something else. Not always something easy, not always something clear, but something that's closer to who you actually are and what actually matters to you. And that idea, more than anything, is what this season has really been about. Now, at the end of the last episode, I mentioned that there was a bigger piece of news coming, and this is it. Over the past year, alongside building this podcast, I've been working on a book called 12 Steps to Success, Finding Your Purpose. And in a lot of ways, it's an extension of everything you've heard in this series. It takes those themes, identity, change, uncertainty, and explores them in a more structured way, not as answers, but as a framework for navigating those moments when things don't feel clear. The book comes out on March 31st. The Kindle version is available to pre-order now, and the paperback and hardback will both be available on launch day. If you've connected with this series, I think you'll find something in the book that builds on it, and you can find all the details and the links over on the website. So, this is the end of season 1, but it's definitely not the end of the podcast. I'm going to take a bit of time to step back and look at what this has been, what's worked, what hasn't, and what season 2 could become. And I genuinely love your input on that. If there are conversations you'd like to hear, people you think would be great to bring on, or even just reflections on what's resonated with you, send them through. It all helps shape what comes next. And if you want to stay connected in the meantime, you can follow along on socials, sign up to the newsletter through the website, and keep up to date with everything I'm building. Instagram is at 12 Steps to Success with the word 12, not the number, and the website is 12stepstosuccess.com. Again, the word 12, not the number. Thanks for being a part of this, and I'll see you in season 2.